All right, let's get into it. The liver. The liver is an organ that sits in the upper right quadrant of your abdominal cavity. It is the largest solid organ in your body. It has a reddish brown color to it. It also has a triangular shape to it, has a rubbery feel to touch, and it weighs about 3 pounds. Now, before we get into the detailed functions of the liver, I'm going to break these down into 6 different functions. First, we have the filtration and storage of blood, metabolism, detoxification, bowel formation, storage, and regeneration. All right, number 1, filtration and storage of blood. So the liver has 2 sources of blood flow. The first source is coming from the portal vein. The portal vein is the blood coming from the GI tract, also known as the gastrointestinal tract. So this includes blood that is coming from the stomach, the intestines, and the colon. The blood coming from the portal vein is usually about 1,000 milliliters. And then you have the hepatic artery, which has oxygenated blood. The blood coming from the hepatic artery is about 300 milliliters of blood. Both sources of blood will be draining into something called the liver lobule. This lobule is going to perform multiple functions that we'll get back to later on. But for the purpose of covering the first point, it's going to serve as a filtration system, and it will determine what gets through and what gets discarded. Also, as a part of the immune system, this liver lobule will filter up to 99% of the bacteria found in the blood. Now, as far as blood storage goes, in abnormal situations where there is a slowdown or a backup of blood flow, such as congestive heart failure, the liver has the ability to store up to 1 liter of blood. The next function of the liver we're going to talk about is metabolism. So when we're talking about metabolism, we're talking about the uptake, processing, and distribution of nutrients. In this case, we're talking about the macronutrients. Now, for macronutrients, we have protein, carbohydrates, and fats. First, let's start off with carbohydrate metabolism. Of course, the liver plays a very important role when it comes to blood glucose regulation, also known as blood sugar regulation. So when we eat and our blood sugar increases, a normal functioning liver will take the excess blood sugar and store it in the liver. This form of glucose is called glycogen, and this process of converting glucose into glycogen is called glycogenolysis. Now, during moments of fasting, when our blood sugar is getting low, a normal functioning liver will convert that glycogen back into glucose in order to maintain a safe blood glucose concentration level. This process is called glycogenolysis. And together, this delicate dance of not too high and not too low is called the glucose buffering system. This is something that the body does on its own. The liver specifically does this on its own. So for many people out there who are thinking or were told that they need to manually regulate their blood sugar levels, we should really question that, because we see that this is something that the liver is already designed to do. Another important point to note is that once the liver has met its glucose storing capacity, it will now take that excess glucose and convert it into fat. This fat will now be shipped out to the fat cells. However, if that process is highly demanding and the liver has to move fast, a lot of that fat can also be stored in the liver. Speaking of fat, next we're going to talk about fat metabolism. So we are designed to survive, and a part of that design is having the ability to store excess energy for the times when food is not available. The way our body is going to store this reserve energy or this long-term energy is in the form of fat. So the liver will convert any excess energy as fat for long-term storage, preferably in the fat cells, but it can also be stored in the liver. And therefore, the liver is a major site for converting excess carbohydrates and proteins into fatty acids and triglycerides, which are then exported and stored in the adipose tissues, also known as the fat cells. And also it can be stored in the liver, as I said before. And your body is doing all of this to store, reserve energy in case that it needs it. Once again, this is a survival mechanism. Something else that's very interesting to note is that at any given moment, your liver is creating 80% of the cholesterol that is found in your body. This is not an accident. It's not a mistake. Your liver is doing this on purpose. And this is going to be a topic that we're going to get into later, but I think it's very important that you understand that 80% of the cholesterol found in the body was made by the liver. less than 20% actually comes from your diet. Next, protein metabolism. So when we ingest proteins, in order for them to be used, they must be broken down into amino acids. Excess amino acids will be sent to the liver in order to be metabolized. Now, during this process of metabolizing amino acids, a byproduct called ammonia will be produced. And if that level increases too much or too fast, this can be toxic for the body, and it can also result in a hepatic coma and or death. So in order for your body to make sure that this does not happen, the liver is going to create something called urea. And this urea will now remove the ammonia, and it will be excreted through your urine. Next, the liver will convert proteins into different types of proteins that will be called plasma proteins. Now, for the purpose of the video, we won't go in depth about these plasma proteins, but I will briefly talk about the different classes of proteins. First, we have the coagulation protein. These proteins are very important when it comes to healthy clotting. In other words, hemostasis, making sure that blood stops when it needs to stop during a cut or a wound. Vitamin K is very important in this process, so also keep that in mind. The next class of plasma protein we have is transport proteins. These proteins are important in the role of transporting fat or lipids, hormones, vitamins, and minerals. And then we also have copper and iron binding proteins. All right, moving right along. So the next function we're going to talk about is detoxification. So every day we are bombarded with toxins. Now, these toxins can come in the form of food, drink, alcohol, smoking, medications and drugs, air, etc. And every day these toxins are entering our bodies, and many of us are aware of this. But have you ever thought and asked yourself, why are we not dropping dead from these toxins? So, as I said before, our bodies are designed to survive. And it has several different ways to detox. Detox means to get rid of toxins. One of the many ways we are able to do this is via the liver. The liver has an ability to perform a process called Xenobiotic Metabolism, meaning that it will take foreign and strange particles from the blood that are potentially dangerous and or toxic and convert them into a less toxic form in order for it to be excreted. Something else you should know is that the liver is also responsible for removing hormones such as cortisol, estrogen, and aldosterone. Therefore, any damage that is done to the liver can lead to an accumulation of excess hormones. Men, for us, this is key because an excess or a buildup of estrogen may not be what you want. For men, a sign that you may have excess estrogen is something called gynecomastia. Gynecomastia is also known as man boobs. The next liver function we're going to go over is bowel formation. Now, I want you to picture that you have a pan with water in it. Now, what happens if you were to pour oil into that water? Right, it forms one big globule of oil. And this is because oil and fat are hydrophobic, meaning that it is not mixed well with water. Now, what do you do if you actually want to break this oil down? Well, you use detergent. And when you put that detergent in the water, it's now going to break that one big globule up into little small oil particles. Well, when you ingest fat-containing foods, that fat leaves the stomach in large globules, but in order for your body to actually use these, it needs to be broken down into smaller parts. So the liver creates something called bile, which sits in a little sac called the gallbladder. Bile will then act as a detergent to fat and emulsifies fat. Emulsification means to break up into very fine droplets that can be dealt with easier. Now, this will allow for the fat to be converted into fatty acids, and it would also allow for the fat-soluble vitamins inside of the fat, which is vitamin A, D, E, and K, to now be absorbed by the body. So, if you're having problems producing or releasing bile, or you don't have a gallbladder, you're going to have problems with breaking down fat, and you're also going to have problems with absorbing vitamins A, D, E, and K. Therefore, you'll be more likely to be deficient in these vitamins. The next liver function we're going to cover is the storage function. So we talked about the liver's ability to store blood, but that's not all it can store. The liver can store enough vitamin A to last you for 10 months, enough vitamin D to last you for 3 months, enough vitamin B12 to last you for several years. And it can also store iron in the form of ferritin. Therefore, anything that affects the function of the liver can affect the storage of these vitamins, which can result in signs and symptoms of being deficient in that vitamin. The next function of the liver we're going to cover is regeneration. Now, this is going to be very short and simple. So the liver is so important that it actually has the ability to regenerate itself. Just go back and look at all of the functions we have covered this far. Now imagine not being able to do those functions. This is what would happen if the liver was not able to regenerate itself. In fact, it has been shown that you can have 70% of your liver surgically removed and the liver will still regenerate itself. It's pretty crazy. All right, so that was a lot. So we're done covering the first section. We now know just some of the functions of the liver, but you have to know that the liver performs over 500 different functions. Next, let's talk about how the liver can be harmed. Yo, what's going on? This is Edward and you have just watched a clip from my YouTube channel. If you want to see the full video, be sure to click the link in the description to watch the full video on my YouTube channel. Peace.